Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our discussion today on ghosting. What is it, what causes it, and how to stop ghosting from ever happening with tech-powered sales. Look, just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. If everyone can please keep their microphones muted for the session and videos off, if possible, and we'll open up the questioning via chat at a later stage, and actually in real time. You can chat us in the chat box anytime you want. So we're just going to wait for a few more attendees to join, but if I can get everyone to jump on the chat box and let us know where you're all from. I'm from, well, living in the Philippines, but I was lucky enough to travel to Australia for a couple of weeks last week. About a week and 2 days ago, and I fly back tomorrow, which is exciting. So traveling's coming back, and it's really nice to be running this actually on sort of my second home soil, Australia, in Sydney, on a very murky day, but no complaints. I'm used to tropical heat on the best of times. So if everyone wants to jump in, yeah, Herb from Melbourne, nice to have you on board, mate. So we'll give it one more minute, and then we'll get started. Richard Cotter, a familiar face. Good to have you. I know you're from Sydney. Paul Ricketts, welcome. It's going to be a good session today. We've got a nice turnout. It's Adrian from Sydney. I hope you're also enjoying the lovely weather at the moment. You know, Melbourne's actually hotter than Sydney right now. I couldn't believe it. It was 29 degrees and extremely humid. But I guess they have 4 seasons in one day. Alex Doyle in Sydney. CRO at MIP and the data school down under. Nice to have you here, mate. Welcome to the session today. All right, 20 more seconds and we're going to get started. Anyone else will add throughout the session shortly. All right. And Aris from Melbourne, welcome to the session. All right, let's get started. So today we're going to be covering, you know, we're not going to be talking about spirits taking over the world, as much as the title might promote that. We're going to be talking about a number of different subjects that are, I guess, related to ghosting and prospecting. Right. So what is ghosting, and how does what impact does it have on your business relationships? How compelling discovery will help you to build trust with prospective prospects. So how do you effectively have good discovery? What is effective? What is good discovery? We're going to explore what it takes to engage buyers effectively throughout the entire process to stop ghosting from ever happening. And we're going to gain a deep understanding of the causes of pipeline atrophy, just to understand why pipeline disappears and wastes away when it should really be growing, right? So moving forward, I'll go a quick introduction to myself. I'm not going to spend too much time on that today. Oh, that's our guest. We'll come back to him shortly. Key speaker. So I've been in the business for about, I guess, 20 odd years now. I manage an outsourced sales enablement organization for demand gen. So essentially we have, I guess, qualified reps that we're an outsourced BDR SDR service, and their job is to generate leads for the technology sector. I've also released a book called Perfect Prospecting, which might be useful as a follow-up to this session. You can find it on Amazon, and I'll send everyone the link to that as well. And I think you'll really enjoy the aspect of trying to find the correct type of client for your organization in that book. There's tons of sales books out there, but if you're looking for something that's a bit more suited to finding the right type of client and what is the right type of client for your business, then that's a good one to get started with, okay? Right, so now for, I guess, a very important part of the session, our key speaker today and my guest, Tony Hughes. Tony, I am so thrilled to have you on this session today. I know we've run a few of these sessions together. Tony, you may be familiar with, he's very well known in the industry. He has an amazing resume with over 35 years of corporate sales leadership experience. He serves on several advisory boards. He's published he's published many books, and he's also published by the American Management Association. Tony has taught sales at Sydney University. He's also been ranked #1 sales blogger globally by both Top Sales Magazine and Best Sales Blogger Awards. I am super excited to have you here today. Welcome, Tony. Welcome.
Thanks, Matt. I am really excited about the conversation. I think this is something that's of interest to everybody in sales. It's happened to all of us.
I agree. Tony, so let's get rid of the slides. We'll come back to those later. Okay, but just I guess so we've sort of the topic. We can leave the topics on there, but I think everyone kind of gets what we're covering. But so we have a conversation. Let's remove those and let's get started. So ghosting. What is ghosting? Well, I mean, look, if anyone's ever, I guess, Googled the definition of ghosting, I guess ultimately it's the, let me find it first. I've forgotten what it was. It's the practice of ending a personal relationship with someone by suddenly and without explanation and withdrawing from all communication. Would you agree with that, Tony? You heard of it? And any other ways of, and I guess, yeah.
Yeah, so there's really two different types of ghosting. One is the one that you just described, where someone that we've had some engagement with, just it seems like they've dropped off the face of the planet. And that's really common in sales. So we're going to talk today about how to prevent that, how to try and re-kickstart engagement, I guess in two contexts. One is when we're prospecting. And then the second context is when we're trying to progress a deal through to actually closing it. But there is another definition of ghosting, and I actually talk about that in my latest book, Tech Powered Sales. What some people choose to do is have someone ghost their LinkedIn profile or their social accounts. So we're all incredibly busy. And if you're a salesperson here on this call, or even if maybe you're a CEO, you can consider as a seller asking your CEO permission to ghost their LinkedIn profile to try and drive engagement into the C-suite. Now that takes a lot of trust. We talk about that in both the book Combo Prospecting that you can see up here and also Tech Powered Sales. So it requires a lot of trust with an agreed framework within which you're doing that. And if you're a senior person or a seller and you choose to pay somebody to ghost your LinkedIn profile for you to give you back some time, just be very careful. The number of in-mail messages or connection requests that I get inside LinkedIn, where I get something like, hello, Mr. Tony J, would you be interesting, in acquiring our services, and I think, what, this is someone with English as a second language. It's clearly not the person. It's not the real person who has that LinkedIn profile. They're paying someone to get in there to try and drive some social selling strategy, but you can often damage your brand. So we won't talk about that one today, but that's the other way of ghosting, is ghosting someone's profile. We'll talk about what do you do when a prospect just disappears on you.
Maybe let's start with looking at the prospecting side. There's different stages of opportunity progression. For me personally, I've experienced ghosting in every single segment, but I would say most salespeople that I've met would experience it more in the prospecting side. So whether you've had an initial conversation and you've maybe carried out 2 or 3 different discoveries. I mean, for me, I would personally feel that if I end up with a prospect that decides to ignore me, I haven't qualified it correctly, number one. Number two, they can just be busy. In the corporate world, things happen, things change. And number 3, they can be talking to someone else, right? There's a number of reasons to why someone may not come back to you. And sometimes it is purely down to embarrassment. But I do believe, Tony, and please elaborate on this further, and your book is actually very good on covering a lot of those things, combo prospecting, as well as tech-powered sales in terms of implementing technology to avoid these things from happening and using the right tools. But I'd love to hear your reasoning. Would you, in your experience, would you say most ghosting seems to happen in prospecting? And why is that, if that is the case?
Matt, we get a higher volume of ghosting in prospecting because we do a lot more prospecting activity than we do with engaging with people where we're progressing a deal.
Sure.
But it's a big problem in both phases. I deal with a lot of sales organizations that really struggle with deals stalling and slipping. And what we know in selling is that time kills deals. So the longer something's stuck in stage and slips, the higher the probability it's never going to close at all. So maybe we'll just frame up things initially around the prospecting phase. So there's a few important things to realize. The first is that all potential buyers, the people who do not yet know us, almost all of them, especially if they're senior, are wired to ignore sellers. They're wired to ignore sellers. So anyone who's a stranger trying to sell them something, they just think ignore or delete. So the thing that's really important is beyond qualifying, which happens deeper into the process, we need to lead with the commercial value of change. We need to lead with the commercial value of change to create some impetus right out of the gate. A good friend of mine, Anthony E. Norino in America, has this phrase. I don't know whether he coined it, but I first heard it from him. This phrase of opening is the new closing. And there's a lot of truth to that. The way that we open a deal largely determines the probability of us ever getting to actually close it. So we'll talk about how we can open in a way that prevents ghosting. But one of the principles is we need to provide value in the conversation for the person. We need to lead with the commercial value of change, and that'll sustain the deal, once we've qualified it and we're trying to progress it as well. And Matt, maybe if I can just go through, maybe actually, did you want to do this poll first? Why don't we do this poll first?
I started it already, actually. I thought I'd get that running as you were talking. So yeah, please, as much input on these polls would be really helpful. So I guess what we want to understand is how often do prospect clients ghost you, disappear, and never to be seen again? And let's class that, I guess, it doesn't matter if it's a discovery stage or at the final sort of closing part. What is it? Where is it in that cycle? How many of your prospects rather are ghosting you? And I can see we've got around 30 to 50% of all prospects, which is quite high. That's actually very high, right? Are you surprised by that, Tony? Because for me, that's the feedback I'm hearing from many of my clients. In terms of, whether we've got different catalysts happening now. So we've got the existing issues, as you've mentioned before, in terms of why this is happening, right? But you've also got COVID, right? And I promised to myself I wouldn't use the C word in a session today, which we're all probably sick of it. But the reality is it has caused a bit of a pause in the mentality of individuals. And that is also causing, the work from home. I reckon 50% of my meetings dropped out on this trip as a result of families getting COVID. And maybe there is some truth that there isn't some truth to that. But the reality is that's definitely played a part in that as well. So yeah, 30 to 50% of all prospects, at 64% of everyone we got on the session today, are saying that, up to 50% of their prospects are ghosting them. That's insane, Tony. That's a lot, right?
Wow. And if that's their qualified prospects, that's absolutely a problem. So
yeah.
So let's maybe talk about how we can prevent the ghosting problem at the front end of the sales process in prospecting.
Sure.
And then maybe we can pause for some Q&A. People can type in some questions, any questions that they've got. So here's my view on the very front end of the sales process. We know that opening is the most difficult and the most important phase of selling. It's the most important because it sets the agenda for everything else that follows. So if we want to drive engagement rather than being ignored, being ignored, I guess, is being ghosted, then the best way to lead with a new relationship is through a warm introduction. So all of us, should be using LinkedIn now. I know there's two types of selling. There's lots of different types of selling, but if I categorize into two categories, if you're doing high volume, low value transactional selling, you don't have the luxury of massive amounts of research from a piece of outreach, right? So you'll be, driving a lot of automation. You might be using some sales engagement platform like Outreach.io or SalesLoft or high velocity selling inside Salesforce, for example. And you'll be looking for the 3% of the market that are actively looking for what we do. So what we need to recognize is at any given point in time, only 3% of the market is actively looking for what we sell, but 40% of the market is open to change if we can break through and build the right conversation. So a warm introduction, if you're doing high value selling, you get one shot at the top, so you should be doing some research. Ideally, you find a common relationship. If anybody phoned me and said, hey, Tony, I was talking to Matt Cowan last week. He thought it would make sense for you and I to have a chat. You've got your meeting with me. Now, you might unget the meeting when I say, what about? So I'll come to that next, right? But a warm introduction is the most powerful thing. The next way to contextualize outreach to avoid being ignored is through a relevant trigger event, something that's occurred in their world that creates awareness of need or opportunity to drive an improved result. And it contextualizes our outreach. So we're showing them why we're relevant to them right out of the gates. And then what we want to do immediately after that, after we contextualize strongly with a common trusted relationship or something relevant that's happened in the world, is we then need to have a point of view about how they as an individual can drive improved results in their role. Because why would they be interested unless it's about them driving an improved result in their role? I know this sounds crazy, but most sellers create almost all of their own problems, their own objections in the way that they try and open the conversation. So as an example of this, if you sell tech, ask yourself this question, are people out there looking for more tech in their life? No. Do people want to take on some change program that has a whole lot of work and risk associated with it? No. Are they wanting another salesperson in their life that wants to take their time? No. So if you talk about any of that stuff, you're really dead out of the gate. But what they do want is they want to drive improved results in their role. So make sure the outreach is contextualized, have a point of view on how they can drive improved results in their role. And in essence, you're nailing your narrative. Your narrative is about them, not you. You're very relevant to them. And the reason this is so important is when we spring from the bushes, with this phoning somebody, or the email pops into their inbox, the best it gets for us before they're thinking, how do I get off the phone? Or I'm just going to delete this email. The best it gets on the phone is 7 seconds. That's the maximum amount of time we have. It can all be over, in less than 7 seconds, right? But the best it gets is 7 seconds. So you need to show relevance very early. And if it's in an email, there's a thing called the rule of 18. If we don't nail why this matters to them, or why we're relevant to them within the first 18 words, it's unlikely they're going to read anything else. Because again, most people, when they get emails, are actually viewing those emails in the preview screen of either their laptop or the very small amount of screen real estate on a mobile device. So make sure we nail the narrative is really, really important.
I have to agree with the emails. I mean, I've had newsletters going off for ages, and the most successful emails that I've ever sent, and actually everyone on this session might have received or should have received the same email. It's just a simple one-lined word. So I sent an email yesterday, which was actually sent via a platform, but it comes across as personal, and it works really well if you keep it simple. Are you attending the session today? And sometimes something that simple, a one-line sentence and a name, cuts through all that noise, right? I'm not saying use that approach for a new prospect or an existing prospect, but getting to the point quickly, right, Tony? I think it's really important. And you're right, getting someone on the phone, and that's what I do as part of my business. I've only got 7 seconds. I reckon I've got 3 or 4 seconds with a C-level executive. Yeah. So I've got to make sure. Like really, and that's if you get them on the phone anyway, right? Because the problem we're talking about now is how do we, once we start talking to someone, right? How do we get that conversation correct? Getting through to someone is a different kettle of fish, right? And building that relationship and having a referral, like you say, a referral from someone that knows you, and that happened to me a few weeks ago, and I met with a client today, and it was a fantastic way to be introduced without sort of all that noise and who are you, we don't trust you, or instead of like, as opposed to, oh yeah, this client referred you over, they're a great friend of mine, I went to school with their kids, fantastic, right? It doesn't mean I'm going to get the opportunity or close the deal, but it certainly puts me ahead of everyone else, right? So I have to agree, Tony. Yeah, you have to drive and improve results for your prospects, and yeah, I think you're right. I think most sellers do create most of their own problems, but you still have to go in there and have a narrative that solves those, right, and shows interest in that. But my question to you though, Tony, there is still a lot of noise, right? So it's all great. Let's just say we get in there, we have a referral, and everything's running right. Let's pass the prospecting stage now. Let's move on to the actual progression, right? And we've moved on to the second call, second meeting, whatever you want to call it. It's now it's gone from the influencer to one of the key decision makers. Let's say it's a marketing director. But then for whatever reason, that call keeps getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And then there's the whole internal, there's something happening. Sorry, we're waiting on budgets or whatever it is, right? There's tons of things that go wrong. Is there anything you can recommend to the audience, to any sales or business owners, salespeople or sales leaders, or business owners in what to do in that stage. You kind of feel like you've covered everything. You feel like you're running on the right track. Is that still go back to the fact that we haven't qualified enough in the first step? We've set a next step. We've qualified. We know there's an issue that needs solving. They're interested in talking to us. They referred us to the right person. But that call never seems to eventuate because, I mean, life gets in the way, corporate life gets in the way. Do you have any suggestions in regards to that component, to the actual progressing, trying to get to, you're nearly at that hill, you put your hand over the hill, and you're not quite able to pull yourself up to the top of that hill yet for the next step?
Matt, let's definitely talk about that.
Sure.
Just two things first.
Go ahead.
Paul Ricketts, we can see your question in here, mate, about what you do if you're launching into a new market and you're not a known brand. So I'm going to answer that question in a second before we move on to what Matt's just asked. But I'd just like to finish the prospecting piece off. There's another thing we need to recognize. So on the back of nailing our narrative, we then need to find a way to break through. So if you're selling into corporates and larger organizations, there's a couple of things that are really important. Never be single relationship dependent. Never, ever be single relationship dependent. So if you're getting ghosted by one person, you should be contacting multiple people. Just remember that for any organization to implement something new, they need a strong business case behind the request to do it, and they need consensus from their team. This also goes to what Matt just asked, which we'll cover in a moment. Right. So you got to make sure that you go at multiple people in the organization, 3, 5, 7 people potentially in the organization, run concurrent outreach. And then the other piece that's critically important is you want to use this principle of combo prospecting. You want to pattern interrupt the way that people just ignore sellers by going at them with the right message. You must have the right message about how they can drive improved results in their role and why you're relevant to them, that you've done some homework. But once you've nailed your narrative, phone them, leave a voicemail, send them an email. A couple of days later, phone them again, leave a voicemail. Hey, Mike, I'm just following up. How's Thursday, 10:15? I'll send you a calendar invitation. Then bump the email you'd sent back 2 days earlier. Hey, Mike, just following up. How's Thursday, 10:15? I'll send you a calendar invitation, right? Bump that email back, then send a calendar invitation. And what you've done in 48 hours in what I've just described is you've done 7 touches. And what we know is it takes anywhere between 7 to 13 touches for someone to respond to a seller. But because we've compressed this down into 2 little clusters of outreach, rather than 1 touch every 3 or 4 days, anything you do on its own just tends to get ignored. If you're just sending an email once a week, it'll just get ignored, right? You want the person's phone buzzing, dinging, ringing, binging. They go, man, I need to get back to this person or my phone's going to melt down, right? So if your message is right, you'll be okay with this. If your message is all about you and what you sell, you won't be. Okay, so let's just go to Paul's question, then we'll go to what Matt asked. So, Paul, the thing is, most sellers try and lead with who they are and what they do. And if you've got an unknown brand or a weak brand, then maybe that's an issue. But I believe that's a giant mistake, leading with who we are and what we do. What we need to lead with is the prospect's opportunity to drive improved results in their role. And when we run outreach, we need to think about 3 layers. So at the top layer, we're talking about the improved result that they can drive, right? The improved result that they can drive. So in my world, with what I do, if I was talking to a head of sales, right, I'd say, hey, Mike, Mary suggested we have a chat. The reason is I think there could be an opportunity for you to get more of your sellers on target year to date and in a way that de-risks the forecast that you're pushing up to the CEO. And then I ask a question. Do you mind if I ask, what percentage of your reps are on target year to date? How much pipeline coverage have you got in the business for this quarter and next quarter? How does that compare with where you think it needs to be? Definitely makes sense to talk. If they go, well, hang on, how do you think I could drive, more reps on target year to date with with a more accurate forecast? What I then go to the next layer. So I've talked about their opportunity to drive improved results. Next layer is not about me. Next layer is the strategy that gets it. Mike, it's about you being able to hold your account execs to account for self-generating their pipeline gap. Do you mind if I ask? Right? And then I ask another question. So the results, the strategy that gets the results. Okay, but how would I do that? right? And then what I talk about is what we do at Sales IQ, right? Then I talk about the methodology and the approach to being able to hold sellers to account to self-generate pipeline. What most people do is the reverse. They say, this is who we are and this is what we do. And then here's all of the activities that you could engage in as a customer and working with us. And then we eventually get to the result. But the problem is they stop listening. That takes a lot more than 7 seconds. And we've led with a conversation all about us. So it's a long-winded way of saying, I don't think brand is that important. You absolutely need to have a strong representation of your personal brand in your LinkedIn profile. You need to look credible and consultative, right? And well-connected in your LinkedIn profile. And on your website, right? Your website needs to talk about the improved results that you help organizations drive. You need to think about the buyer personas that come and visit your site. Because if you run outreach, what we find is about 75% of the time that anybody is thinking of responding to you, if you nail your narrative well and you find a way to break through and thinking, oh, maybe I'll reply to Paul. What they'll do is they go look at your LinkedIn profile or they'll look at your website. So you want that to have credibility. It doesn't matter that you're not sort of the Boeing or Airbus or Coca-Cola or Apple brand. You just need a brand that looks very credible when they look. Just to support this, our corporate executive board and Gartner did a whole bunch of research around what really influences people once they've got a short list, who they're going to go with. Brand was only 18%. So confidence in the brand was only 18%. More than half of the decision weighting was around the engagement experience that they had with the selling organization. So this thing of having a credible point of view on how they can drive improved results in their role in a way that dials down the risk of achieving the result, that's what usually creates winning differentiation. So don't lead with your brand and what you do, because you're creating that objection. Lead with their opportunity to drive an improved result. Hope that was helpful. Hey, Matt, just having a look at the at the chat in here. So this is great. So thanks, Karen, for your comments. Thanks, Paul, for the feedback.
Yeah.
So Paul, I agree with you, mate. The whole thing of multiple contact points. Mate, and you're right. We need to not be annoying. So I agree with that. So let's just address that point.
Yes.
If your message is about us and what we do, and they're not in the buying window, they're not part of the 3% that are actively looking for that at the moment, then you will be annoying. You'll just be an annoying spammer. That's the problem. So many sellers seek to automate some of their selling using sales engagement platforms like Outreach.io and SalesLoft and High Velocity Selling, these tools that are out there. But if you're loading spam into your Gatling gun, I don't know whether you know what a Gatling gun is. It's that revolving machine gun that you see Arnie use in some of the movies, right? So if you load spam into your Gatling gun of automation, you're just going to burn through your list, get your domain blocked, and be labeled as a spammer. So the message is everything. The message is everything. So if I'm talking to a head of sales, I'm all about them de-risking the hitting of their number with a more accurate forecast, with stronger pipeline coverage in their business. And the way I feel is, well, what sales leader, doesn't care about that? Every sales leader, at times in the year will feel like they age a whole year of their life every quarter, just from the stress of trying to pull deals forward to make the number. And it's all because there's not enough, quality pipeline in the business, as deals stall. So, okay. So Matt, why don't we move on and talk about what do you do once you've got a qualified opportunity that you're seeking to progress and make Ghost? Yeah,
sure. I've got one. Can I ask one more question, Tony? I agree with you. And in terms of the touch points and is it harassing individuals, right? Yeah, that is definitely on the mind of many, including my own. And even after I read your book, Tony, Combo Prospecting, which is fantastic, and anyone that needs to understand that the process of multiple touch points and how to get the right, finding the right buyer persona for your organization, as well as the right messaging, read that book. It's just awesome. It changed the way how I did business and how I acted as a business owner. My question is, Tony, so if there was about 2 or 3 business owners that gave me some personal, tips on a bit of humor. So let's just say you are stuck and you're not sure whether or not you have qualified the opportunity, or whatever the reason, right? You haven't, you felt like this deal was a sure winner. We've covered the reasons to why that person might be ghosting you. What about funny joke emails? So I remember someone advising me to send an email saying, "Oh, look, we're not sure if you've been abducted by aliens, but just tell me where to find them and we'll send them over to you," or something like that. Did you find adding a bit of humor and non-salesy related, nothing about the deal? Did you find that's helped you or some of your your clients in the past?
Matt, that's a great question. We absolutely need to be the authentic self in how we go and sell. Right. So if you do humor well and you want to use that in how you sell, great.
Takes practice.
I really love that. But humor is a very dangerous thing. It's difficult to get humor to land well. And Matt, that example you gave is from a lady, good friend of mine called Mary Lou Tyler.
Sure.
She authored the book Predictable Prospecting. So a huge amount of respect for Mary Lou Tyler. And Mary Lou, in her book, Predictable Prospecting, gave some examples of how to try and reboot engagement. And what you just said about, kidnapped by aliens was in her book, right? So
that's where it came from then. Okay,
good. So she actually had examples, and if Mary Lou ends up watching this, I apologize if I get this wrong, but I'm just going from memory. But in the book, it'd be like an email that says, hey, Mike, I'm just following up on my previous emails. I usually find when someone doesn't get back to me, they've either been A, abducted by aliens, B, they've fallen in a hole and need a ladder, or C, they've just been really busy and needed a prod, now, the first time someone sees something like that, they might smile, maybe. The second time they see that, they go, "Oh, these salespeople all did the same course or read the same book."
Yes,
right? So
you
definitely need to be you. And using humor with someone that you've never had a conversation with can be really tough, right? So, yeah, okay. Hey, we've got a question here from Con. From Con. Actually, just from Adrian first. So, I understand that you need to shift them. However, does condensing our contacts into 48 hours create annoying behavior? Adrian, that's a great question. So, what I recommend in the book Tech Powered Sales is in B2B selling. There's a couple of things to consider. The more senior the person, the less frequent those sequences, those combinations of channels, those sequences, the less frequent that should be. The more junior the person, the more frequent it can be. The other thing is when you open the engagement in the first week, right, you want to run at least 2 sequences, right? So that'll be at least 7 touches in the first week. In the second week, you wouldn't go to that same frequency. Now, what you do is you up the number of channels, but you're not doing it every 48 hours, right? Because I definitely agree with you. So when you ask yourself the question, how frequent can the combos, in essence, the little concurrent sequences of channels, how frequent can I be running those? The more senior the person, the less frequent. But in your opening week, do the first 2 sequences within 48 hours. You just want to send that message. This is important. I'm relevant to you. Don't ignore me. give me a valid no, or give me some engagement, but don't ignore me, right? Because most people think, oh, it's a seller. They'll just give up. On average, salespeople give up after less than 3 touches of a prospect, right? And yet we know it takes 7 to 13 minimum, right, to get someone to respond. So initially you can condense it and then dial back the frequency, but dial up the number of channels is my advice. Matt, have you got any comments on that? You drive a lot of outreach yourself in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're just focusing on one outreach, let's just say it's my traditional sort of approach. Let's not call it cold calling. Let's call it warm calling. You do the research and everything else. There are now C-level executives out there that will refuse to answer their phone, not to C-level directors of any type, will not answer their phone to people they don't know, right? So the fact that is a major issue. So if you do not apply multiple touches, there's a couple of reasons behind that. And Tony, you definitely explained that very well. But what you're doing is you're pulling that person out of their busy world for a few seconds. They're not answering their phone. They've seen you've left a voice message. They've seen an SMS, and then they've seen something on LinkedIn and an email. Like, hang on a minute, and they'll pull themselves up. What is this? I've got to see this. Now, if you don't have the right compelling message, they'll probably ignore it. But if you have the right messaging, then this person will be dragged out of their busy world, and they will respond to you if it's something of interest, right? So absolutely, yeah, no, you have to have multiple approaches. And yes, you can be annoying. I'll be honest, Tony, when I first implemented that approach, I did annoy a few people, but you're always going to get the odd person that just doesn't like being pushed in that way, right? And then the reality is, if you've got the right message and you do it the right way, and you don't multiply attack them every day with the same approach, it works really, really well, especially SMS actually, because that's a channel that isn't used that often, right?
Yeah, text messaging is very powerful. So
yeah.
So a couple of things to be aware of. If you're going to phone somebody, if you give them a call and you're not going to be in their address book in their phone, so you'll come up just as a random number. If you don't leave a voicemail message, they may end up blocking the number. I've got friends of mine in their voicemail greeting, they say, hey, if you don't leave a message, I'm going to block this number, as you know, to stop scam and spam callers. So always leave a voicemail is really important, is really, really important. So, hey, we've got a comment here from Con, which I really love. And Con, I love the Clash, mate. What a great band. Should I stay or should I go? You know, that's a really good piece of humor. If you wanted to use that. So yeah, I really like that. So Matt, let's talk about what do we do when people start ghosting us with a deal, a qualified deal we're seeking to progress through to close. Yeah. So
I like that. Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So let me frame that up. There's 4 reasons that deals slip, stall, and die. The first reason is a lack of compelling commercial value in the eyes of the people that actually approve it and sign it off. So you may be selling to somebody, who's very supportive and they'd like the thing that you sell because it makes their life a bit easier within the business, but they've got to go and take this up the line, you know, to the CFO or the CEO for approval. And what inevitably happens is the person we're dealing with says, I've got it, you know, don't ring my boss, don't talk to my boss, don't talk to other people, you know, this is my decision, I'll get it approved. And all of a sudden they're not ringing you back. What often happens is they go internally to get approval and they get pushback. Their boss says, hey, Mike, I've got 17 other things I'm being asked to approve right now within the business. We can't do them all. It's not even about the money you want for this. We don't have the bandwidth to do them all. There's a lot of change fatigue in the business at the moment. Why this project over everything else? And if our person does not have a great answer to that question, our deal is dead. So if they've gone quiet, it may be because they sought approval and they didn't nail the issue of compelling commercial value, strong commercial value. And that's why when you open an opportunity, you have to open it in a way where you anchor the deal in the commercial value of change. What's the improved result for the organization and the person in their role? So that's really important. So make sure when you're talking to your prospect, the person you're dealing with in the organization, even say to them, what are you going to say if your boss says, we don't have the bandwidth to do everything at the moment? Why this? They need to be able to finish these 2 sentences. This is essential because, and it pays for itself by. If they've got a 7-minute rambling answer instead of that, your deal's in trouble. And if you're a sales manager watching this, say to your reps that have got a deal in the forecast, when Mary goes to John, the CFO, for approval and John pushes back, how is Mary going to finish these 2 sentences? You know, John, you need to approve this. It's essential because, and it pays for itself by. Really important. Next reason that deals slip, stall, and die is a lack of consensus. As they try and get approval, they get some pushback from other people. People need consensus in an organization for change. So make sure you've covered not just the people that you think say yes, but the people that can say no. Who's going to have to provide some resources to implement the thing, for example, that you're selling? Really important. So compelling commercial value, consensus. And then the third reason that deals slip, stall, and die is a misalignment in process. Often our buyer may not have bought something like this before. They may not have signing authority for this level of spend. Maybe they got told that they had a budget to go do something, but what they didn't realize themselves internally is that that didn't mean they had the approval to go spend it, right? They've got to go back with a business case to justify releasing the budget. They didn't understand that they needed to attach a business case, with the request. So you need to do a thing I call create a mutual plan. Some people call it a close plan or a success plan or a project alignment plan or a mutual plan, but work out with the person you're selling to, what are all of the things that need to happen between now all the way through to the deal actually being closed, right? So that there's no surprises, because that's the fourth reason deals slip, stall, and die is some kind of nasty surprise. The person we're dealing with leaves, a new CFO joins the business, they get acquired, they post bad results, COVID hits, like some nasty surprise happens. And although you'll feel like you can't manage the nasty surprise thing, what we know is that time kills deals, and the longer a deal drags on, the higher the risk. And if you can ensure that there's compelling commercial value in change, and you've secured consensus with the key stakeholders, so I never want to be selling just to one person. And then the third piece is you've created a mutual plan, an alignment plan with your prospect on what both organizations need to do to get this thing through to being implemented successfully. So one of the big mistakes sellers make in creating a mutual plan is the mutual plan ends. It actually ends at the point of the purchase order being placed on the seller, right? Which shows the wrong intent. That is bad intent. I've got commission breath. I'm all about me and my sale, right? You don't want to do that. You want the end event being a benefits realization presentation to their executive, for example, right? Because that's the thing that unlocks a case study for you, but not the date they make the commitment. So they're typically the reasons that deals slip, stall, and die. And we need to make sure that we cover those off. Now, we've got another great comment here from Con. So I use something similar. What's the cost of not doing this? Yeah, Con, I really love that. I really, really love that. I've got a comment here from Karen. Do you want to talk about that, Matt? In relation to the poll.
On mute. Okay, I'm off mute. Hey, Karen, I know Karen personally, and what she offers is fantastic. She's an expert in the industry and what she does. But price is always an interesting one, and I think it goes back to what you were explaining before. I don't think price is really relevant if you show enough value, right? Whether you're charging hundreds of thousands of dollars for your service locally, or someone's offering the same service at half the price to an offshoring company overseas. I think if price is the one that's shut out, and maybe as you said, Tony, you get to the very end of that buying cycle, and then the CFO's about to sign the final document, and he's like, whoa, hang on a minute, this one, well, no, what's the cheaper option, right? And whether that's an internal cultural issue or whatever it may be, right? But for me personally, for price, if you're being shut down on price, I think I agree with Karen in a lot of ways. They're not the right type of client for you. And quite often, if I'm being pushed on price, we know someone that can you do it 30% cheaper? I don't want to work. I would rather not work with that prospect, right? With that prospect client, because I know that relationship will not. They do not see the value in what I do. Would you agree, Tony?
Yeah. So I do. And Karen, just maybe some feedback on price. So. We definitely know that we can get excluded for an opportunity early if they just perceive that we're out of the ballpark, right? So if they're asking about price early, we want to give them a range. We never want to lead with product or price. That's the wrong conversation. What we want is we want the customer comparing us with the cost of inaction, right? So that we want them thinking about, I'm going to work with you, or stay in current state. Look what current state is costing me. Look at the cost and risk of staying in current state. So we want them comparing us with the business case for change, not comparing us with our competition, where it's a feature, function, price comparison. So we don't want to get excluded early because they think it's out of the ballpark. We've all had the frustration of dealing with someone that's got, champagne taste and beer budget. So where all of this comes back to is the size of the problem and the seriousness of the problem that we're solving. The bigger the problem or the bigger the prize for the customer implementing change, then the more money is available to justify investing in that change. The last thing I'll just say on price is, again, in this research done by Corporate Executive Board, 5,000 buyers, decision weighting once they had a short list for buyers, price was 9%, only 9%. So I acknowledge you can get excluded early if you position price wrongly. But again, if we open a deal by anchoring it to the commercial value of change, it'll justify the investment. Last thing on price is, if we truly are selling a commodity, if it truly is a commodity, then price absolutely is a factor, right? But if you're in business to business sort of problem solving, solution selling, then that's not a commodity. And risk is really important. What you want is the customer thinking, why would I jeopardize achieving this improved result by going with someone cheap? Right? You actually want them thinking that, right? I'm going with this person and company because they took the time to understand us. They've helped us with the business case. They've helped us secure consensus. We've met their people. We're confident that they'll work well with our team. We've got the highest confidence in getting the result and working with them. It doesn't matter that they're more expensive. I don't want to jeopardize the result by going cheap. Okay.
Thanks, Tony.
Can I just give everybody as a takeaway? There's three questions. So I really liked, Con, that example that you gave. You know, what's the consequence or the cost of just not doing anything in this area? And I acknowledge you're looking at it, but what happens if you just decide to wait? So kind of like that question. Here's my three questions that I found have really transformed sales careers. Every time you engage with a prospect, especially if they're in the mode of asking us lots of questions, your first question is, hey, Mary, do you mind if I ask what's happened inside your organization that's caused you to want to look at this? Now, don't say to look at our company, just to look at this, like at this area, right? Like, let's imagine they're inquiring about buying a CRM system and you sell CRM. You know, hey, Mary, what's happened inside the business that's caused you to think that you need a CRM? Next question, if you were to implement something, whether it was with us or anybody else, what improved result or results are you looking for the organization and for you in your role? Okay, so what's happened to cause you to look at this? What results are you looking to drive for the organization and for you in your role? Now, what you're uncovering here is this really a person of power? Do they have clarity about the problem they're trying to solve? And is it a serious problem or not? Because if it's not, we may suffer from the big problem that many sellers have, in that we're good enough to create some interest and engagement, but we're not good enough to make sure it progresses through to closure because the commercial value wasn't strong enough. So those first two questions are really key. And then the third question is, hey, Mary, where do you see the risks in getting this implemented successfully? Where do you see the risks? And this is your opportunity to start to go, well, what do you mean? Right? So, for example, if I was selling CRM, I'd say something, well, one of the main reasons that CRM implementations can fail is that it's not implemented in a way that enables the seller's process aligned to buyer's journey, right? In a way that gives your sellers back their time. Because that's the only basis on which you're going to capture the accurate data into your system that you actually need, right? So they're going, right? So you can say, so what are the sales processes that you're going to want to implement? Have you defined your processes, right? Have you thought about how does this give your sellers back their time, right? So for example, if you look at qualification and discovery in a selling process, how will the CRM enable your sellers doing blended qualification and discovery in a way that helps your pre-sales manager decide whether they should release resources, you know, in the sales process? So those three questions are really, really powerful.
Great stuff.
Hey,
Sorry,
Matt,
we've got another question coming in. Sorry for cutting you off there. And it's probably more around government tenders. So that's from
Yeah,
Sorry,
the structured procurement process.
Andrew
Yeah.
Kirk. Yeah, it's a very different kettle of fish, right? When you're looking at a government tender, I mean, a lot of it. I guess the process to be similar, but very different maybe at the start, because sometimes tenders are written for, yeah, they're written for. They're not written for you, if that
Yeah, yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah.
So Andrew, great question. There's a couple of things here. Strategic selling by definition is engaging early. Engaging early at senior levels, help them co-create the business case, help them define their requirements, identify their risks. And in doing all of this, you hardwire positive bias toward yourself and against competition, all in the best interest of the customer. So whenever we see a tender document, Matt's right, have a look at the tender document for the evil sticky fingerprints of competition, right? You go, man, there's all of this language and verbiage, and this is wired around a competitor, right? So the first thing we need to look at. I acknowledge that when you sell to government, I had 12 years of selling to government. I've sold whole of government contracts where I've paid my rep a $500,000 commission check on one deal. And I know the frustrations of selling to government. It takes a long time to get on these panel contracts. Then you got to go through it all again with every department. But once you're in with government, there's a big reward if you can be successful. I acknowledge that in government, they have all these probity rules. And once they've got into a procurement process, they block you from building relationships. And if you ask them questions, they often educate your competitors, with what you asked. And here's the answer as well. So with responding to government tender, if they're in a process, we just need to recognize that they'll make a decision based on what they perceive to be the best value for money. And value for money, the value for money equation, risk forms a big part of it. Government buyers care vitally about risk, and they'll find a way to justify buying from whom they believe to be the lowest risk solution provider. So you need to figure out, how do they define fit for purpose? Where do they see their risks, right? And if you can just make sure that you tick as many boxes in the fit for purpose piece, and that you are absolutely perceived by them as the lowest risk, for example, because they'll be obsessed on the features and functionality, what they're buying, but all of their risk is not really there. It's all in how they implement and how they do change management and support. And so you want to try and reshape the agenda, especially if you can get to the shortlist phase and you're doing a demo. So get them to fall in love with your people and the way that you implement something for them, as opposed to just product, because product is often perceived as a commodity in the eyes of the buyer. Even if there's differences, they go, look, all the products can do the job for us, right? But they'll be thinking, who do we trust? Who do we think can get the result for us is really key.
Tony, do you want to cover, given in the interest of time, we have about 8 minutes to go, you want to have should we start sort of exploring the types of personalities at Ghosts? Because that's an interesting one. I mean, every personality is different. I mean, I would say I'm the one that doesn't go. I do not ghost people. I'll tell someone straight out, direct. No, just go away, or what? I'll be direct with them, right? But not everyone's like that, and most people will not be as direct as me or you.
Okay, so Matt, what we've talked about today with everybody is the problem of being ghosted by a prospect. There's the problem in the opening, the opportunity phase. So we've talked about that. Then there's the problem of, I've got a deal, I'm working, and all of a sudden it goes quiet. And we've talked about the 4 reasons that can happen, right? And what we can do to remedy it. The way we remedy it is make sure there's strong commercial value to sustain the momentum. Make sure that we have helped them secure consensus, because lack of commercial value and lack of consensus are 2 key reasons why deals stall. Third thing, make sure that they understand their own internal processes for getting things approved and done, right? And all of those 3 things, if we do them, should minimize the risk of just some kind of nasty surprise happening to us. Okay, but let's talk about when you've got a deal you're working and it goes quiet, about personalities in business. There's 4 basic personality types. There's lots of different personality profiling tools. There's Myers-Briggs, there's DISC, there's Herman's brain dominance indicator tool. There's all of these methods, but in simple English, the 4 personalities are a driver personality, a driver. The opposite of a driver is an amiable, in essence, a peacemaker, a people pleaser, a conflict avoider, right? So there's drivers, and the opposite then is amiables. The higher up you go in an organization, the more driver personalities you will encounter because they're ambitious and rise to the top. The other two personalities are an expressive personality, and the opposite of the expressive personality is the analytic. So a driver personality will tend to be a driver analytic or a driver expressive. Now, amiable people and a lot of the people who evaluate, so project managers, technical people, people in HR, because their personality attracts them to these kinds of roles because they're not filled with conflict, right? They're sort of focusing on technical things and helping people. So in the middle and lower levels of the organization, this consensus layer, there's plenty of amiable people. Now, here's the thing to be aware of. If you push an amiable person, they do not like it. They withdraw from you. They ghost you. They go quiet. And you need to recognize that what they need to be able to progress with you is they need you to have high levels of empathy for them in their role and what they need. They need you to be supportive in ensuring that no one in their team or company is left behind or disadvantaged or not on board with what it is that we are recommending. So what they need to be able to progress with us is they need consensus. Now, an analytic person, if you push and pressure them early, they can also ghost you as well, right? They can actually ghost you as well. And if you push them hard, they'll end up resenting you. So amiable people want to make sure there's consensus. Analytical people want to make sure that they're making the right decision. So if you're pushing an analytic without all of the data to help them see that this is the right decision, we're going to manage our risks, right? Including consensus with the team. Unless you do that, you'll find that they can tend to ghost you. Now, people can ghost you because priorities change. They get COVID, their mum gets cancer. For me, I've got a holiday place here in Sydney, got wiped out in the floods we had in Sydney recently. That's a distraction in my life. I'm trying to get that fixed, right? So I'm not getting back to some people because there's got a lot going on at the moment. So there's things that can happen, but at a personality level, if you're dealing with amiable people, recognize that they need you to be supportive and you need to help them gather consensus. If you're dealing with an analytic, you need to make sure that they can see that the data is there to support this decision, right? If it's a driver expressive, how does this help them realize their vision for a better future state and drive improved results? So those things need to be addressed. Otherwise, people will think, hang on, I don't have the confidence to go ahead yet, right? So at a personality level, that's one of the things we can do. So I just want to give a really quick wrap up. Make sure that you lead with the commercial value of change right out of the gate. Make sure you build a mutual plan with your prospect to identify all of the things that need to happen internally in order for them to go ahead. That'll really help you avoid getting ghosted, right? So we're all on the same page. Make sure you build multiple relationships in an organization. Don't be single relationship dependent. But here's the big thing. Whether you're prospecting or whether you're progressing an opportunity, don't misinterpret someone not getting back to you or ignoring you. Don't misinterpret that as being rejected. They're just busy. And if you convey the right intent about them driving these improved results for the organization and them in their role, you can be brave and bold in how you run outreach, because the intent you're showing is this is important for you in your role and I'm committed to helping you. Right. So that's really the key thing. So Matt, thanks for having me on, mate, with the webinar. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Tony. It's been an absolute pleasure, and what a great session today. And if anyone wants to contact us, our details are showing on the screen now. And just sort of to wrap up in the last sort of 20 seconds or so, Tony, Tony's got some really great books that I highly recommend you look into. The two that I'd recommend would be Combo Prospecting and Tech Powered Sales. I'll send you the links to those. And if you want to take a look at my book on the process of finding the right type of client. I'll flip that off to everyone at the end of the session as well. Tony, thanks for your time. Thank you everyone in the audience, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Matt. And just encourage people, go and have a look at salesiqglobal.com if you want to learn more about these concepts. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.